We're going to move to House Bill 5081. This is by Representative McNamara. This is regarding health and safety. We're trying to establish the Rhode Island Rare Disease Medication Accessibility, Affordability, and Reinsurance Act. Do we have someone here for virtual testimony? Okay, stand by for one moment. Hello, this is Representative Casey. Who am I speaking with?
This is Nick Doherty.
Hello, Nick. You are appearing...
How are you, Mr. Chairman?
I'm doing fine. You are appearing before the Health and Human Services Committee on House Bill 5081 by Representative McNamara. If you could give us a brief overview of the bill and your thoughts on it, we would appreciate that.
Sure. 1 second here on the overview part. I was trying to be mindful of everyone's time. So again, thank you very much for having me tonight. My name is Nick Doherty. I'm the Director of Policy for Pharma based up in the New England region. I'm in Boston. I am here tonight on behalf of Pharma. This is the country's leading innovative biopharmaceutical research companies devoted to discovering and developing medicines that enable patients to live longer, healthier, and more productive lives. Since 2000, pharma member companies have invested nearly $1 trillion in search for new treatment and cures, including an estimated $83 billion. Now, House Bill 5081 seeks to establish a state-run reinsurance program that would limit prices on orphan drug treatments that treat rare and often life-threatening diseases and conditions. This bill would empower the Rhode Island Secretary of Health and Human Services, based on recommendations from an advisory council, to determine which products are eligible for the reinsurance program. Essentially, they would be allowing the Secretary to pick winners and losers among what treatments would be used for rare diseases. So the bill certainly has a lot of details with it, and there's a lot to unpack. The statement we submitted to the committee provides much greater detail, and for the sake of time, I'm just going to address a few of the concerns that we had. The first being the mechanics of the legislation may lead to access issues and serve as an impermissible price control that may stifle innovation. So this is concerning, especially given that 50% of patients affected by rare diseases are children, and 95% of patients living with rare diseases have no FDA-approved treatment options. So we're concerned the methodology used by the Secretary in determining which drugs would be covered and which would not may create some access barriers for patients. So as drafted, the Secretary, based on recommendations from a politically appointed advisory council, will decide what is best for rare disease patients, not the patient and the providers, because the process does not include any meaningful stakeholder engagement. We feel this is problematic because the availability of reinsurance payments for some, but not all products, to treat a particular rare disease likely means that insurers would be much more inclined to cover a drug that is eligible for reimbursement from the reinsurance program than one that is not. The bill also doesn't account for new drugs as they come into the market after the Secretary determines a covered drug is eligible for reimbursement. So this would be concerning because insurers might delay coverage or impose access eligibility designations. So by waiting, a patient may be losing valuable time for treatment, and this is especially concerning for progressive diseases. The other aspect, as previously mentioned, is price controls. We're concerned that this does establish a price control, and this would negatively impact innovation, especially in challenging research areas like rare diseases, which is the focus of the bill. And while rare diseases now account for 31% of R&D pipeline, up from 18% in 2010, the success rate for orphan drugs in clinical trials is estimated to be only 6%. And overall development for orphan drugs take nearly 4 years longer than non-orphan medicines. Also, by applying a price control to patented medicines raises constitutional concerns under the Supremacy Clause because it would restrict the goal of federal patent law, which is to provide pharmaceutical patent holders with the economic value of exclusivity during the life of the patent. Now, Pharma does recognize the access challenges faced by patients in Rhode Island with serious diseases and the intent behind this bill. and do want to reassure the members that we stand committed, ready to work with the legislature to develop market-based solutions to help patients afford their medicines at the pharmacy counter. And for these reasons, we urge legislators to oppose House Bill 5081, and with that, be happy to take any questions.
Okay, are there any questions from the committee? Okay, I have one. So, I'm just reviewing the text of the bill regarding the makeup of the committee. And you are correct, there's 15 members, directors of the Department of Health, Department of Human Services Medicaid Program, Office of the Health Insurance Commissioner, University, one representative from the School of Pharmacy at University of Rhode Island, 3 representatives of insurers, one of which shall be Medicaid Managed Care Organization, 1 representative of a pharmacy benefit manager, and 3 representatives of prescribers representing different clinical specialties knowledgeable about the treatment of rare disease, and at least one of whom shall be a licensed pediatrician. So, if you would like to volunteer for the board, I'm just kidding. Would you be opposed to this legislation if there were representatives from the pharmaceutical companies included on this?
I'd have to go back and talk to the industry. I'm only representing the 33 companies based on the guardrails that were put in place walking in. So any amendments I'd certainly have to take back to the companies and run past them.
Okay. We do have a question from Representative Fogarty. Go ahead, Representative.
I'm sorry to be asking so many questions, but while we have this gentleman on the line, I think this was geared towards Representative McNamara had a particular patient who was on a medication and then had to stop in the trial and was doing extremely well on it. So it's very emotional, I think, for some people that, if they could continue on some of these medications where you think that they might be orphan drugs, that we had the parents in, we felt the toll of what happened with this particular family. And I think that's what he was looking for, if they could continue on with these medications where some people do well in the trials, and if we could keep them on that. If that's something you could bring back to the 33 companies that you represent. For full disclosure, I worked for GlaxoSmithKline for 24 years. I know this industry pretty well. And I also want you to bring back to the industry 3 of the bills that we started with tonight that were talking about the cost of insulin. And since it costs about $1, a vial, or maybe $10 at the max to make a vial, why some of the patients are paying up to $275 a vial for a drug that was created over 100 years ago. And
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if the question is directed towards me, but if it is, I can't hear the question being asked at the moment.
Representative Fogarty, for some reason we're having an issue hearing. Due to our connection, I think our guest is having an issue hearing you.
All right, we'll just bring back to his company that some people, can you hear me now? Can you hear me, Chairman Casey?
I can hear you very faintly. So I think that Representative Fogarty, the gist of her commentary is that we've heard bills prior today regarding the price of copays for prescription insulin, and I think she'd like to communicate or have you communicate back to your companies that there are issues with other prescription type drugs that are cost prohibitive for people, and especially in the case of insulin, where it's a drug that was discovered and created over 100 years ago, and it does not cost a lot to produce. That we need to try and see if we can come up with better solutions for drug pricing in that realm. We're going to try to get Representative Fogarty back online. We're seeing if we can reconnect her link. In the meantime, are there any other questions from anyone else on the committee? All right, and I'm sure that our next witness will be able to answer a few questions as well. Nick, I appreciate you with your testimony, and certainly if any other committee members. So we have Representative Fogarty back. Representative Fogarty, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes, I can
Okay.
hear you. I'm going to just stop my video and,
We can hear you much better. If you would ask the question of Nick that you had, I tried to summarize it, but we'll see how that worked out. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I took the video off. I was running out of power. I had to charge my phone. My question was that if you could bring it back to the 33 companies that you represent from the drug industry, that in fact, some people who do well on these trials and then they stop these medications that, and leave people hanging and then, end up, passing away. That was the gist of this. We had a family who came in who had lost a son who had done well in one of the drug clinical trials, and then I think had an issue getting the medication. That's what this bill was about. So some of these people who do well, if there's a way that they could stay on the medication. And again, you did a very good job, Chairman Casey. That was my other question about the cost of insulin. If you could bring it back to the 33 manufacturers, I know, a lot of them still are making making insulin. There's different types of insulin, but I mean, basic insulin that keep these people alive. We really need to do something about the cost, or the states, as we've heard in testimony, are taking it into their own hands and, making sure that people aren't going to get charged, more than $25 or $50 for a co-payment of insulin. So you represent the industry. I worked for the industry for GlaxoSmithKline for many years. So I feel like while you're here, I'm going to push back on two of the issues, two of the bills that we've heard tonight that you bring back to the industry, because people are paying attention to it here in Rhode Island. Thank you.
I apologize, Rep. I could hear some of it, and I didn't want to interrupt. I will say that at the last hearing, we were in support of the insulin copay cap bills that were heard. I think from what I heard, there is a conversation that needs to take place of separating drugs like insulin versus orphan drugs that treat these rare diseases. There needs to be two separate conversations on the pricing aspect of that. But that's a big reason why I'm here. I'm very close. I'm up in Boston, not going anywhere, and really do want to be a part of the solution in making sure that patients continue to have access to these life-changing drugs, and also make sure they're affordable.
Thank you, Nick, for your testimony. I appreciate it. And it's nice to hear that you're in favor of the copays, the copay reduction for the insulin. That's encouraging. Are there any other questions at this time for our witness? Okay, then we will move to our last witness. Thank you, Nick. We'll move to our last witness. We have another person on the line. Hold on one moment. Hello, Mr. Lopes. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Donahue.
This is Sean Donahue, representing Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island.
Yes,
How are
Sean.
you, Chairman?
I'm good, sir. This is Representative Casey, Chairman of the House Health and Human Services Committee. I have you here testifying on House Bill 5081. If you would please give us your testimony, and you have our attention and the floor. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd also like to thank Chairman McNamara for putting in this piece of legislation. And I know you've been at this for over 2.5 hours, and I appreciate the time of you and the rest of your colleagues. I'll be very brief. This bill I'm going to talk about in two parts. The first part is why we need this bill, and the second part of what this bill does. First of all, I'd like to talk to you about Malachi. Malachi was born in Mansfield, Ohio, back in 2015, and as reported in the New York Times article, at about 4 months old, Malachi was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, a rare genetic disease that progressively weakens muscles. Only 1 in about 11,000 babies will be born with spinal muscular atrophy each year. But until a recent scientific breakthrough, the majority of children with SMA did not reach their second birthday. Children with SMA have a defect in an SMN1 gene. Scientists have come up with a one-time treatment that is designed to target the genetic root cause of spinal muscular atrophy by replacing the function of that missing gene with a new working copy of that SMN gene. Malachi received this medication at about 5 months old and immediately saw improvements in his condition. He is now enjoying his preschool activities And according to his mom, he continues to, with the help of daily physical therapy, make improvements on his motor skills. This groundbreaking treatment was created by a Swiss pharmaceutical company called Novartis, and it's called Zolgensma. The initial price quoted of this miraculous medication is over $2 million for that one application. Thanks to the incredible advancements in genetic research, there are other stories like Malachi's that are on the horizon. Approximately 2 million people worldwide have an inherited retinal disease, an IRD. One particular type of that disease, a defective RPE gene, actually leads to blindness. A new treatment, which the FDA has approved, allows for a working copy of the gene to take place of the defective gene and allow for the production of a key protein that saves the person's vision. This drug is called Luxerna, and it's manufactured by Spark Therapeutics down in Philadelphia. The price tag for that drug is $850,000. Researchers at MIT and Harvard have projected that there are as many as 60 new genetic-based therapies for rare conditions considered by the FDA, for consideration by the FDA over the next 5 years. The challenge for policymakers will be to come up with the sustainable ways to pay for these extraordinary innovations. Chairman McNamara's legislation would establish a funding mechanism to ensure kids like Malachi have better access to these life-saving, super expensive medical therapies. The proposal creates a state-based reinsurance system that spreads the cost of covering these medications across the broadest possible population base. How would the funding work? The state, for the last few years, has had a very successful drug immunization program for not the COVID drugs, but all the other vaccines, your regular flu vaccine, your Tdap, all of the standard vaccines are paid for through this pooling mechanism that shares the risk. This approach has been very successful. This is a similar approach. The program will bring together a group of stakeholders to determine which rare disease groups to cover and what expenses across all carriers might be. The assessment rate would be developed and paid into a state account. The difference is, and this is what I really take exception to with the previous witnesses, that this difference is that the health plans still have to pay the drug company for the cost of the drug. There's no financial risk to the state. The end of the year plans that would have claims that are subject to this program would then seek reimbursement from the reinsurance fund. Why that is necessary is if there's no way to spread the cost of these risks, these costs of these expensive drugs across the broadest population, you may have municipalities, other self-insureds that just can't cover the cost of the drug. So Representative McNamara's approach in this legislation is to do the opposite of what the preceding witness said. This is not a cost control mechanism. This is an access to the medication that they're providing for these miracles of recovery and in some cases, life-saving medication. On behalf of Blue Cross, I'd like to express our appreciation for your time and for Chairman McNamara's leadership on this issue. I'd also like to point out that at 1 in 11,000 cases, that means that it is only a matter of time before some child in Rhode Island, and they may have already come down with it, comes down with an SMA type of drug, a type of disease. And how are we going to have a system in place to pay for those drugs? That's what this legislation is targeted at achieving. Not preventing access, just the opposite, ensuring that there's access for these medications when these cases inevitably arrive here in Rhode Island. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee or the chairman might have.
Thank you, Sean, for your testimony. I appreciate it. Do we have any questions from the committee at this time?
I just need a quick clarification. This is June Speakman.
Go ahead.
Yes, could the witness who just testified from Blue Cross just run through an example? So Malachi needs a medication that costs $2 million. So where does, just help me understand, I know you said it, but help me understand, where does the $2 million come from? There's a fund set up, it's restricted, it's held by the state, and how does that get filled up with the $2 million?
Certainly, I'd be happy to, Representative. So currently in our vaccine administration program, sorry, I have to turn off the phone, good Lord. Currently our vaccine administration program is an assessment on insured lives, but it's a broad assessment. It's assessment on all Medicaid, all VA, all commercial plans. So at the medical professions on the panel look at what medications or immunizations have to be purchased for that year. Then they come up with a member per member assessment, and the insurers pay into the fund at a pro rata basis based on their market share. So Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island pays the largest because we benefit from the largest market share. But everybody pays a pro rata share into this fund. Then the state goes out and buys the immunizations at a price that we couldn't match because they can get government-based pricing for the immunizations for the flu shots and the regular flu shots and all the other immunizations that you're suggested to get. And then at the end of the year, if there's a balance left over in the fund, the next year's assessment on insurance carriers is lowered. But the types of immunizations that are decided on by that body are made by that body. We don't have an influence. They look at what is necessary to be immunizing our population, and they make that decision. And then we go about the process of assessing each insurance carrier for the amount of people that they insure, and then that money is paid over into that fund. It's worked well for almost 10 years now in Rhode Island, and we have some of the highest vaccination rates in the country. The way this plan is different from that plan is instead of paying into the fund first and then the state purchasing the drug, we would still purchase the drug, and then if one of our members had the claim, we would at the end of the year be able to go back to that fund and seek reimbursement to protect our subscribers and our ratepayers from these rate shocks that are inevitable from these multi-million-dollar medications that are in the pipeline right now.
That was very clear. It's late at night. I'm really tired. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. Sorry, Rep. Kassar, I interrupted you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean.
You're welcome, Representative McLaughlin. My pleasure.
And we have a question from Rep. Kassar.
Yes.
Happy to try
thank you, Vice Chairman. So my question is just if there are funds like this in other states and how long they have been working and kind of any history.
I'm sorry. I don't want to miss the question. I can't hear what she's saying. I really apologize.
All right. Vice Chairman, if you can just repeat the question for the witness, just trying to understand if there's a program like this in any other states so that we can take a look at the history and how the funding stream has worked and the demand.
Actually, I did hear the question. Rhode Island would be the first state to do something like this, but there are other private agencies that are doing it. There are PBMs that are coming up with products that they can sell to insurance plans to cover this cost. And we just think that the state could save money by doing it themselves rather than paying a profit margin on top of the service to insulate carriers from from those shockingly high prices for the drugs. So there are private sector solutions that are out there. We just think that with our experience with the immunization program, that Rhode Island is uniquely situated to be able to do this in a way that is at the lowest cost and provides this absolutely imperative access to these medications for our residents that may have these conditions.
Sure, that makes sense. Have there been any sort of analyses of the effects of the PBNs and the demand for the products?
I think you said, has there been any analysis of, and I lost the last part of the sentence after that.
Sure, and any assessment, any way to forecast the demand at this point? Any history to look at?
Yes, I did hear that. Yes, we expect that there'll be 13 claims filed. We have actuaries that have actually come to us with a red flag up and said, we have to get something in place because their function is to forecast out into the near and far future to find out what our exposure is. And they say that it's likely that Rhode Island will see 13 claims in the next year for drugs that would be on an average of $1.5 million. And so that number will probably go up as these new innovations come through the pipeline and get FDA approval. So there may be a couple these first few years, but it is only going to get bigger, and the snowball is going to keep rolling because there are these miracles that are coming out of this incredible scientific improvement, but these miracles are miraculously expensive. And so what Chairman McNamara's legislation tries to do is get us in front of that inevitable outcome, because the last thing we want to have to say to any Rhode Islander that is facing one of these conditions is that they can't have access to the medication because it's not covered by their drug plan. And we want to be able to make sure that the funding mechanism is present so that they can access these medications as they roll out to treat these very rare conditions.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Rep. Kassan. Any more questions? Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do I have any more questions? Okay, I'd like to go to the next witness, which would be Leonard Lopes. Leonard Lopes, this is Rep. McLaughlin. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Mr. Lopes, this is Representative McLaughlin. You have some questions? Please start.
Yes, Representative. This is Leonard Lopes, and given the late hour, I would be very brief. I represent the Healthcare Distribution Alliance, which is the national organization representing primary pharmaceutical distributors, which is the vital link between the nation's pharmaceutical manufacturers and pharmacies, hospitals, long-term care facilities, clinics, and others nationwide. In a nutshell, we are the FedEx for meds. Had a brief conversation with the chairman about his bill, because not that we were opposed to his substantive goals, but rather it appears as though on page 5 he's bringing the wholesale distributors within the cost pricing paradigm of the pharmaceuticals, and respectfully, we don't do that or get involved in that. We pay the price that the manufacturer sets for us. So with that, I just want to state that I look forward to talking to Chairman McNamara and seeing if he would acquiesce to our concern about possibly extracting us from the bill. Because what we do, we simply deliver the drugs to those who need them, and we don't essentially get involved in the pricing thereof.
Okay. I want to thank you, Mr. Lopes. Do we have any questions for Mr. Lopes from Representative Fogarty?
Mr. Lopes, again, can you hear me? Just
Yes.
to make sure that you can hear me.
Barely, Kathleen. Would it make more sense that we could talk offline tomorrow? Because I can barely hear you.
Okay. So I stopped the video so I could put the phone right to my ear. I'm using it on my phone. Can you hear me now?
A little better. Give it your best shot.
Okay. My question is, I as I stated earlier, I worked for GlaxoSmithKline with the healthcare distributing part of it, the Cardinal Healths, McKesson's, and so forth that you're probably representing. But, there is a surcharge as the middleman and the price of pharmaceuticals getting to market. I remember it distinctly with some of the products that I have of what we would sell direct, what the middleman, the distributors would pay into that, or charge, and then the pharmacies, charge on top of it. So, there is a cost to what you do as in part of it. Do you not agree, or you think you still should be immune to this bill because of that, or for any particular reason? Thank you.
Respectfully, I think I heard most of the question. You mentioned middleman and the cost thereon. My client and I spoke about that particular aspect, and it represents about 1%, but we do so much volume, that's where we make our money. The profit we get is just the 1%. And also, we get paid for other things we do for the manufacturers along the distribution chain that aren't essentially dealing with the cost of it. So the bill appears to deal with the cost of the drug that's being negotiated. So if that's your question, Representative, I can still get you further clarification, but I respectfully didn't hear the entire question, so hopefully I'm in the ballpark. But no matter what, you have my cell number, and I'll get you whatever answer you need.
I thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'll be in touch.
Thank you, Mr. Lopes. This is Representative Casey. I'm sorry I had to take a brief break. It's nice to hear your voice. Are there any other questions from the committee at this time? Okay. If not, thank you, Mr. Lopes. We look forward to hearing from you on House Bill 5189, which is coming up soon. So that will conclude the hearing on House Bill 5081. Are we ready for 5189?